Hi, Pete. Welcome. Who's on your dream team? Besides a mentor, who's on your dream team? Today, we're going to talk about Beyond One Mentor, the framework for a dream team with our guest, Pete Schramm. Okay, I'm so excited for this conversation. So I want to introduce Pete to our community. Super excited for this conversation. Pete and I connected, I don't know, within the last 6 months, and I've already learned a ton from him. I think we have from one another. So super excited for this. Pete Schramm is a farm-raised founder. Say that 12 times fast. Farm-raised founder, a best-selling author, and an award-winning speaker whose personal mission is simple. Nobody should have to navigate their professional journey alone. From the fields of Butler, Pennsylvania, to basketball courts and then boardrooms around the world, Pete has delivered over 125 keynotes. He's grown 2 7-figure businesses and empowered thousands through his book, Pathfinders, Navigating Your Career Map with a Personal Board of Advisors, through his podcast and his leadership development platform called Latitude. Pete attributes much of his current work and lifelong success to the great experiences he had as an engineer turned leader at AK Steel, 2-6, Lockheed Martin, MTech, Kinetic, and ETC. He's led large teams, he's grown his portfolio, and he has helped keep the good guys safe. So welcome, Pete. So happy that you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Lisa. Thanks, everybody, for joining, whether you're watching this as a recording or you're live with us on LinkedIn or YouTube or looking over somebody's shoulder as they're on another platform. And I also just want to say a quick piece. It'll come up throughout our conversation today. But as I was starting the entrepreneurial journey and building Latitude, Lisa and her mom were 2 of the people that I looked to for advice and guidance. So we will talk about some concepts of mentorship and building a personal board of advisors today. And sometimes we're going to have individuals that we're having live conversations with. But I also want to have people think about who could potentially be a mentor from afar and just noodle on that concept for a moment. And so I can't say enough thanks to Lisa from afar, and to be able to do it live, in person one day. We'll get there. But it's just really, really special on so many levels.
I love that. And I love the idea, too, of kind of these mentoring moments or these mentoring insights that you could really translate and eventually into in-person relationships, which is really terrific as well. If you are just joining us, just a reminder to put your name in a comment so we can enter you into our giveaway. So, Pete, let's just dive in. Tell me a little bit about, where does your interest in mentoring come from?
Oh, gosh. So I grew up on a farm, as you mentioned earlier, from Western Pennsylvania. Yes, I'm a Steelers fan. We did lose to the Seattle Seahawks from your neck of the woods. Yeah, it was going to come up at some point. And I realized that I didn't want to stay on the farm my entire life. And I found that having conversations with others and asking them about their career journey, professional journey, how'd you get to where you are today, helped expose me to various different opportunities, some that I liked, some that I didn't like. For example, I thought I wanted to be an architect for a long time. Frank Lloyd Wright. Here we go. And then I shadowed one, and I'm like, no way, this is not for me. So that was kind of peripheral or early stages of getting advice. Maybe that was flyby mentoring in the initial pieces. But it got to the part of, I found these successful people when I got into the professional world, and they surrounded themselves with others. And I said, I want to be the best that I can be. And I realized that I couldn't do it alone. So if the really successful people have mentors and they're doing this mentoring thing, then I should probably do some of that. So it was a long piece of trial and error and cold outreach and just knocking on offices and saying, hey, can I pick your mind? And just stumbling through the process, because believe it or not, I didn't have your book or my book early on in my career, which would have been absolutely super, super helpful. So I'm curious and I'm always in sponge mode.
Yeah, sponge mode's great. Always be learning, right? So one of the things that I love about your book is that it encourages individuals to build a personal board of advisors. And that's a term that's sometimes thrown around. Let's talk a little bit about that concept of a personal board of advisors and what inspired you to, use that model to talk about personal career development.
So the Department of Defense asked if I'd do a TED Talk and I figured, maybe I could talk about mentorship. So yeah, sure, let's do it. There's a couple more steps in the process. Let me be very clear. But at a high level, and I said, well, whenever we think about the DoD and the government in general, typically there's not a lot of innovation. Let's face it. And so, what if we were able to push the boundaries and expand the mind? So, as I'm going through the 3 or 4 months preparation with an absolutely amazing team, I said, what if we talked about the idea of multiple mentors? And then doing some research, I realized like this has been talked about for thousands of years. It's not new to me. Nobody's really
Yeah.
defined what a personal board of advisors is. So I thought to my background and asked a couple hundred people, who are some of those different guides that you have along the way? And what do some of those board seats look like? And so that's how we began to fill those gaps and figure out. You can see in the book, and we can share more details. But how do I surround myself with a diverse set of individuals to provide various different kinds of insights, perspectives, stories, experiences, and just guidance? Because if we're just hearing from one person, that could be helpful. But think about all those other lived experiences and counter perspectives and just other bits of their knowledge that we're missing out on if we're only
Mhm.
learning from that one highway of knowledge, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. When I hear the term board of advisors, I know sometimes I wonder, is it really a board, right? So many of us have sat on, not-for-profit or for-profit boards where we've actually all met in a room together, whether it's live or virtual. Does your vision of a personal board of advisors follow that model?
So we think about organizations have a board for guidance, accountability, structure, and a little bit of support. And the
Hmm.
board is going to guide the leader, but they're not necessarily going to get involved with the day-to-day activity or do the work for that leader. So
Yeah.
if that's helpful for the leader in an organization, what if we were able to equip ourselves with a board for guidance, accountability, support, and some growth? These board members aren't necessarily going to do our work for us. And I have some infographics in the book that show this. And so, similarly to that, and then a question that comes up a lot of times, Lisa, is around what about an all board meeting? And so, in part 3, we talk about hey, maybe it's necessary, but be extremely respectful of everybody's time. And maybe you start off with a subcommittee board. So you get a couple of those members together to see how it goes, and then you can build from there. So definitely guidance from a couple of different people. And it's up to you if you want to have an all board meeting, maybe once a year. Try it on for size.
Yeah, I love that concept, right? Because one of the things that I think a lot of people miss is this concept, as the advisee or the mentee in the
Mhm.
middle of this board of advisor, that you are actually providing a connection and exposure for the folks on your board too. And it can be incredibly valuable to have those people connect with one another,
Oh, yeah.
and generate it. And that is, a lot of times we're thinking like, oh, we're taking. That's a form of the giving and the reciprocity, right? Is those kind of connections that can happen between board members.
Yes, and we can ask them and say, "Hey, you've been super helpful to me, Lisa. What else could I be doing for you? Is your board fill? Let's have a look at your career map. Maybe there's some. Are you looking to be on boards of other people, of other organizations? And maybe you're going to say something that you asked, and I can't help you with it yet. But at least you're able to share it with me. And if it pops up in conversation in the future, I'll have it in the back of my head."
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Knowing that we can give as well, even by asking and finding out what is needed there. And many times you have a reluctance to do that, but I think that that's really important because no matter what your level is, you can always kind of pay it forward and pay it back. I love that in your book you talk about a career map and you talk about a personal board of advisors. So tell us a little bit, Pete. How do those two things fit together? Career map, board of advisors.
Yeah. Well, this is through failure. Because I remember talking to some of the first potential mentors, and this was in the high school and college time frame. They said, "Pete, what do you want to do with your life?" I said, "Well, I don't want to be an architect. I learned that." And then it got into, "I want to work in energy." They're like, "Great. Why don't you go and boil the ocean while you're at it?" And so
Mm,
they started to encourage me to think about, what does that mean? Where do I want to go? And for whatever reason, it took me a couple of years to figure out that it was really helpful to write this down on paper or put it in a PowerPoint file so that I could visualize where I've been, where I'm at, and where I want to go. And over time, we started to break it out into a couple of different components. I talk about the 5 dimensions of a career map: past, present, and future. And so, Lisa, whenever you have some kind of a plan, then it's a lot easier to share with you and say, "Hey, check this out," right? And you're able to look at a piece of paper, or you could use different software systems, and then they're able to provide more clear guidance, advice, and support. And so it was by coupling the map with the people, then we're able to be more intentional, and we're able to add more value, and we're able to go places faster. And that's why the whole theme around Pathfinders is navigating this map, right? And just think about, if you're, remember whenever we used to use paper maps back in the day, you open it up and you say, "Okay, this is kind of the route that I'm looking to take." I don't know about you, but anytime we did a family road trip, there were multiple atlases from AAA in the car for each of the states that we were driving through. And you better believe that there was a Route 1. And oh my gosh, well, what happens if that road's out? Well, then here's a Route 2. And then here's the different things that we want to see along the way. So that's the piece of kind of coupling together the map with the folks that have been there, done that, to get the most experience and the most out of our professional journey.
yeah, I love that. I'm going to go off of our questions that we had talked about, because I think that this really generates a really interesting concept that I'm wrestling with, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it. One of the things that to me is so attractive about a map is that I'm rethinking all of my um, past thoughts on goal setting. I still think goal setting is important. I still think it's important to kind of have these concrete goals. But what I love about a map is it allows you to take different routes in a way that often goal setting doesn't, right? You can, that there's going to be an obstacle on I-90, so you take 405 instead.
I'd
Right? Or
personally try to not take either, but yeah, I hear what you're saying.
right? You can recalibrate based on traffic and obstacles and weather and all of the things. And um, I love what that concept is helping me think about when I think about rethinking about goals, because I've spent a lot of time thinking about, how are we setting smarter goals? How are we thinking about, this one path? But maps really help you think about the whole landscape. How does that land, and what does that bring up for you?
So there's 2 things on that one. We like to talk about Smarty whenever it comes to goals: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely, and yours. Because a lot of times people say, "Here, you have to do this thing. This is your goal," and you're told what to do. And you ask yourself, how in the world does this relate to me? How in the world am I supposed to incorporate this to my career map? How in the world does my work fit into this bigger picture? I don't understand this at all. So sometimes we have to um, get smarter and smarty up our goals, if you will. And I love the analogy, well, the link that you made there between the map and having a couple of different paths that we could go down. And that's why I went in that direction, because I was that kind of person that was like, "Okay, I have to go from here to here to here to here to here. And if I don't do that, then I'm a failure." And then I realized that change is the only thing that's for certain. And if we look at like pages 66 and 67 in the book, you'll see Pete's career map from 2017. And that was probably, if I go back to my Microsoft Word file, it was probably iteration like Rev 87 or something like that, because
Mhm.
I realized that I had to add kind of, okay, if not this, here's option A, B, C, D, E. And yeah, I have 6 options for one of my potential future paths in there, because again, change is the only thing that's for certain. And if this doesn't happen, okay, well, maybe that's where our journey is not supposed to go yet. We can come back to that, but to not be devastated and to be okay with a couple of different things. And by visualizing it, then we start to be able to say, okay, I could see how this can tie into this next piece. But what if I took this route, right? Go back onto
Yeah.
405. Then that's
Yeah.
still going to get us over there. And so all is not lost if one step is changed.
Yeah, I love that. Dana says, hi, Dana. She says, I like the added Y, your goal. That's new to me. Yeah, we've started to use Smarter, which comes from Michael Hyatt, and the E and the R is exciting and risky. So I'm like Smartery to bring
Yeah.
it all together. I kind of like the combo of that. The other thing about that is really I'm chewing on is the reaction that a lot of people have to smart or smarter or smartery is that it's about the achievement and not about the learning, right? And so one of the things that I love about a map is along the way, really, we say all the time at Center for Mentoring Excellence that learning is the purpose, the process, and the product of mentoring. The purpose, the process, and the product of mentoring. And it's really not about the achievement of the thing, but about who you become along the way as you learn, and that sometimes the destination changes, and actually that's not a failure. That's a success, right? So thank you for the framework of a map, Pete, to really help think through and help me think through those thoughts and articulate that differently. I think that there's more thinking to be had, but that's really powerful.
I love the Smartery piece, and I think there's one other one for all our listeners out there is to Bruce Lee these concepts that we're talking about. And I think that's in the book, Lisa, on page 40. So as I was running around the promenade, the water in Hong Kong when I was studying over there, first time out of the country, by the way. And if you're a farm boy from Western PA, Washington, D.C. was a big shock. And then you go the whole way around the world for 6 months and you're like, whoa. But after 3 days, I got out of my cocoon, and in typical Pete fashion, I said, I got to explore, see what's out here, see who's out here. And would run past this statue all the time. And Bruce Lee has this quote: absorb what is useful, discard what is not, add what is uniquely your own. And that's what you just did with smart, smarter, smarty, smartery. And other people might have more letters to put onto it.
Yeah.
And we might talk about the idea of, the personal board and a couple of the seats, or some of the dimensions of the career map and the achievements. You're like, well, I want to add in the, 5 Ps that Pete talks about. I want to add in something. Do it. Add what is uniquely your own. So we encourage everybody here to Bruce Lee these concepts.
Yeah, another Seattleite. So I appreciate that. Okay, so let's talk about this idea. We titled the session Beyond One Mentor, and you and I have both talked about in our work this one mentor myth, right? That, there's somebody to whom we should hitch our wagon for all of career's time, who can give us all the advice on all the things. So what's the myth and how do we bust it?
I think the idea and concept of just one mentor only, and only a mentor that's assigned to you, is leaving chips on the table. We can only go so far, and we can only know so much if we go down that only path of guidance, support, and development. And so I encourage everybody to say, hey, if one's helpful, why not 2 or 3 or 4? And that was a concept instilled in me whenever I was little, growing up on the farm. Dad's like, hey, if you're going to do 5 push-ups, why don't you do 10 or 15 or 20 push-ups? If you're going to go pick a dozen of corn, why don't you pick like a bushel or a bin of sweet corn, right? And so all within moderation. But going back to that piece that we had earlier of one could be great. But what happens, Lisa, if you have this mentor, Pete, and he's telling you all these things and you're like, oh yeah, this is fantastic. But Pete's a knucklehead and he doesn't actually know what he's leading you right off the edge of a cliff. Your path is not headed for success, but it is headed for, flames and all those other things. And then let's assume that you're not a fan of flames in this instance, right? So by having the other side of the coin And maybe there's even 3 sides. We say, hey, at least start with 2 or 3 people on this personal board of advisors, get a couple of different inputs. And you're not necessarily saying, hey, person 1 versus person 2, he said, she said, only one can be right. Again, they're here to support you. So you take that input, you take those ideas and thoughts, and you take action on what makes the most sense. You can ask for clarification, and you can compare and ask for some other perspectives along the way. But to stop at just one person that's been assigned to you, I liken it to like betrothed, right? You get married, go, get out of here. Don't ever come knocking on my door again. If it stinks, I'm not too worried about it. That's that end of story. I'm like, no, come on. Let's move beyond that.
Okay. So Pete, what you talk about 10 distinct seats on the board. What are they?
Yeah. So we think about beginning with the least formal and then getting into more and more and more formal as we keep progressing. So I'll pull up the book just so that we're all on the same page. The buddy is the first board seat and least formal. Then we can get into our accountability partner or our accountability buddy. And then we're going to get into our supervisor, functional mentor, cross-functional mentor, champion. We used to call one of them a sponsor, Lisa. We've actually shifted that to be advocate, to be more inclusive and a more positive connotation from first edition of the book to the second edition. We get into the ally, the successor, and the coach as well to round out those 10. And our board is likely going to change who we spend more time with: early career, mid-career, late career. I'm probably not going to have a coach and or a successor in the first 2, 3, 4 years of my professional journey. As you get ready to step out of that first position, maybe there will be a light succession that takes place, but thinking about how we can be more intentional about handing off the torch. And going back to your last point about, we could call it the legacy mentoring paradigm of one-to-one, that's typically where we would see the functional mentor fall under that category.
Got it. Cool. Let's talk about ally for a second. And ally, and you said you're using the word advocate instead of sponsor. Talk about the difference between those two. That's kind of part A of the question. And part B, I'll just in case you want to answer at the same time, which is when you're adding somebody to your board, do you specify to them what role you want them to play? How do you make that happen? So the difference between ally and advocate, and making the ask and being, specifying what the role is.
Yeah. So think of advocate as the super connector, right? Somebody that's giving of their brand, whereas a mentor is giving of their time, right? Somebody that's, you might not spend as much time with them, the advocate. You might not spend as much time with the champion either, being that they're a couple of levels above you professionally. Whereas the ally is either they are an ally or you are an ally. So the icon for this in the book is the binoculars. So helping us see, understand, feel, and really know what we don't know. And we don't want to be sideswiped or blindsided by diversity. And being a tall white male in this field and coming from defense contracting, where that's where you see a lot of other people like that, this was one of those ones that I didn't know what I didn't know in this space. And so the chapter in the book that probably took me the longest was this one, believe it or not, because there was so much for me to learn and to put myself in the shoes of others to really understand, hey, how can we, and it's not tokenism. We're not just checking the box, right? But it's how do we understand the other perspectives of the situations? So that's how I'd go through ally and advocate differentiation. And to get into the second piece of how do I add somebody to the board? Frequently asked question is, do I have to formalize this? Do I have to tell them? Do I have to send them a request for PBA, documented? And the answer is, it's what works for you. What I found is to keep track on your side, right? We have the different worksheets. You can use the software to go through and actually track who your board members are. And, believe it or not, everybody can operate a pencil and paper to just take some scratch notes as an initial starting point and say, you know what? I think Lisa would really fit well into a champion role for me. Maybe I should just go have a conversation with Lisa. So we have a conversation. Lisa, this was super helpful. You mind if, we find a time 3 months from now, do a follow-up? If that's a yes. So it's kind of like a process flow, right? Putting my engineering
Yeah.
hat on here.
Yeah.
And so then we get through that conversation. I compare this to my 14-point checklist, say, okay, yeah, we are headed in the right direction. We're aligned. I think we could really do well here. I don't formally have a champion yet. So potentially at the end of that third conversation is whenever I might say to you, as part of the hiring process that we talk about,
Yeah.
is to give gratitude, right? And to say thank you for what you're doing and what you're providing. And I like to add a little bit more oomph to that thank you, that attitude of gratitude. And to say, Lisa, I don't know if you realize this, but throughout our couple of conversations so far, you kind of been like a champion to me. And, I read this book, Pathfinders. They talk about this on the board. So you're kind of on my personal board of advisors already. And so taking this approach of, thanking you for something that you're already doing, you're already knocking out of the park. You feel good because you're a rock star at this instead of, hey, Lisa, I heard this guy, Pete, talk on this podcast and LinkedIn Live. And he said, I have to get a champion. And I think you have to be my champion. Can you do this for me? And you're probably like, whoa, I am swamped. No
Yeah.
thanks. And so it's just how we go about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the specificity is really helpful. Like, I want to know, people often, I have this conversation with folks in the context of finding a mentor, right? And, will you be my mentor? Often has that same reaction when it's in an informal, outside of a mentoring program of like, are you asking me to marry you? And it's just the first date, right? And it's the same kind of thing. So the specificity of what you're looking for and the role that you want somebody to play can be really, really helpful. I love that.
And on that real quick, I will, when I do this speaking, I'll ask the question, how many people got married after their first date with somebody? And probably 2 hands out of about 20,000 so far have gone up. So if anybody's listening right now, please put into the chat. If you are person number 3, congratulations, right? You saved a lot of time, and hopefully, good things, and it progressed to success from there. But I do caveat with that. You might have conversation 1, you say, wow, this really is absolutely fantastic. Statistically speaking, and usually it takes a couple of conversations, couple of dates before we say, hey, let's PBA up.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. I love that being a verb, right? And it's like to PBA. Okay. So let's talk about how it shapes our conversations and how to shape the conversations once we know who's going to be in what role. Walk us through, Pete. What now?
Yeah, well, I'd say dive into the software, and it's going to walk you through each of the, hey, if you're in board seat 1 versus board seat 2, what each of those conversations are going to be. I ask you, you ask me. And there's going to be a lot of similarities, right? The first 1 or 2 conversations are building rapport, building that relationship, understanding if we're a good fit for one another, and then figuring out, hey, what are our goals, right? Set those goals and expectations for one another, and also the what's out of bounds. And I think that's a big thing to understand. And just ask the simple thing like, hey, Lisa, I like the direction this is heading in. Have you mentored other people? What's worked, what hasn't worked. And so I think it's important to just get the fit and the foundation down early on in those relationships. And then as we get into conversation, and okay, hey, Pete, what if we get that done in like the first 20 minutes? Okay, then progress, right? Bruce Lee, these concepts. So then we get into, learning more about their background, sharing more of your background. We talked earlier, Lisa, about the career map. Hey, can I see your career map? Can we talk about your Ikigai? Can you look at my career map? Can we look at your Ikigai? Right. And then building on that piece and saying, okay, if it's the champion, we're probably going to do, kind of bottoms up on the career map and work through that piece of it. If we're the accountability partner, we're going to work from the right to the left and start with the fun piece on the career map and get back to the day-to-day work stuff. And every couple of conversations, we want to make sure that we add in the, hey, we set those goals and expectations. How we doing along with those? And particularly with the coaching role, which has been another one to really learn a lot more about over the last few years, and ICF as well, is to really focus in on the agenda at the beginning of each of those conversations, and then do the quick, debrief at the end. Was this helpful to you? Do we need to start, stop, continue, shift, SSCS model, whenever we get into the next conversation? So it can look a couple of different ways. Whereas the buddy, we're going to do Rev 1 of the career map together. The supervisor, we're going to look at kind of the very next step on the career map. And so really integrating those two concepts together of career map and PBA.
Awesome. Okay, I want to zoom in a little bit, because you used a couple terms that I don't think we've defined for folks yet. If they haven't read your book, they might not know. So one is Ikigai. What is that, and in this context, and why is it relevant?
Yeah, so Ikigai is a concept that comes from the Japanese. And whenever we break it down, we think about it in 4 different dimensions, right? What do I like doing? What am I good at doing? What does the world need? What can I get paid for? And that's a little bit of a Pete spin on it, but those are the major concepts. And so it's a little bit of a kind of finding my why, finding my purpose, thinking about some of the Simon Sinek, ideas and concepts out there, but just a nice tool. And then whenever we see where these different concepts overlap, we're able to more effectively communicate, hey, what's your why? What's your purpose? Well, it's kind of between like the intersection of this and this and this. And if people are listening, they're like, oh, shoot, Pete, can you say that again so I can write those circles down? You can find it online. You can find it in the book, right? But Ikigai, Ikigai. What do I like doing? What am I good at doing? What can I get paid for? What does the world need? And if you're not able to find any alignment, and those 4 circles are like spreading further and further apart, whenever we apply this to our work, then it's important for us to start to have more of these conversations and figure out, can we bring them a little bit closer together? Or is it a time for me to maybe look at a different opportunity? And that's something that each of us has to figure out a little bit more.
Yeah, I love the application of Ikigai here. We often talk about the term native genius, which is one that Liz Wiseman, Christian Wheeler have both championed, which is the intersection of what you love and what you're good at. So I love the idea of thinking about how can native genius and Ikigai come together to help bring you clarity. The other framework that you used, and you mentioned it quickly, but I want to slow it down just a little bit because it's really valuable, Pete, and I would love for folks to benefit from it, is SSCS. So tell us a little bit about what that is.
Well, I'm curious for those listening, if anybody can just write a yes or a yay or anything into the comments here, if this has applied to you at any point in your journey. Have you ever had a one-on-one with somebody that was a waste of time or stunk, or you're like going into it, you think to yourself, my gosh, what in the world are we going to talk about? And then you leave like maybe 3, 4, 5, hopefully not more than 35 minutes later. And you're like, wow, that was indeed, in fact, a waste of my time. I cannot believe that I sat through that. That was absolutely terrible. And so through trial and error, Lisa, is where SSCS came from. And it's where it's pretty simple. I ask you, you ask me these 4 questions. A lot of people say do stuff in 3s, but I'm realizing that a fair few of these concepts that I talk about are in 4s. But it's very simply put, hey, Lisa, what should I start doing? What should I stop doing? What should I continue doing? And what should I shift the way that I'm doing it? I ask you, and then you ask me. So it's a nice way to add a little bit of structure and help and goodness to our scheduled one-on-ones. And even if we just do it every other week for 10 minutes, that's better than nothing.
Yeah, I love it. I think, that ongoing feedback and reflection it's a muscle that we don't exercise enough, and it really can help improve each of these relationships.
And the piece of feedback that you just mentioned, I really want to emphasize that, because I didn't even know that I was supposed to be asking for feedback until a couple of years. And I had this remarkable director at one point in time. And we used to have these like 7 a.m. coffee meetings. And if I was there at 6:55, which was like an hour away from where I was late by 6:55, one of those kind of situations.
Mhm.
But she asked me one day, she said, "Peter, you open to some feedback?" And I said,
Should
I
I
think
grab a glass of
so.
wine or brace myself for a sucker punch? What's coming my way? Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, I think so, but what does that mean? And she was so kind and opened up and said, "Hey," because I'm like, what, 2 years out of college? I think, feedback. Geez, oh man, I must be getting, fired or something. Both F words in the same sentence.
Yeah.
Um, and so that was where I really began to understand that I could then ask for feedback. And since then, I've had plenty of, feedback's not all created equal, and feedback is not always welcomed, and feedback does not always land well, whether I've been on the delivering end or the receiving end. And so to wield it effectively and to leverage it and optimize it for the best growth potential for yourself.
Yeah. And for it to really be something that's continuing, it's not one cataclysmic event. It's a regular
Mhm.
habit that you're doing as part of the relationship. Susan, it's stop, continue, and shift. Start,
SSCS.
stop, continue, and shift. Yeah. Um, yeah. So I think, having feedback is something that's ongoing, and you practice it so that it doesn't become like, am I going to get sucker punched? Right. It can actually be a really great positive feedback as well. So,
Lisa, before we go to the next one, let's just do a quick role play for our guests here. So
yeah, I
I'm your
love it.
mentee, you're the mentor. We'll call it functional mentor for the sake of this. And
Okay.
there's something that I royally screwed up. And you're
Yeah.
like, oh, geez, I got to get them back to good. How would you go about this? We've already done the introductions, we got our agenda. Now the ball's in your court to drive this conversation. How might that go?
Yeah, I love that, and I love me a good role play. Okay, so I think what I would say is like before we move on, Pete, let's take a minute and just reflect on this. How do you think it went? Right, and
Oh,
then yeah, right, and have you first have some reflection on this?
hmm.
So you might say it went great.
Yeah, it went great. I knocked it out of the park, Lisa. What are you talking about?
Yeah, yeah. Let me see if I can share a different perspective. Right,
Oh.
right. When you, and I always say you name the behavior, right? So
Mhm.
when you did this, right? I'm making facts up, obviously, because here we are in a extempo role play. But when you made this presentation and you pointed at the person on the other side of the table, I noticed them shrink back. Is
Mhm.
that something that you saw?
Yeah, I saw
Yeah,
that.
yeah, right. So what do you think that might have been a reflection of? Right, and
Um,
when you use it to point to specific behavior and ask for their own feedback on what it could be, and you also might say, okay, that's a great perspective. What if I was looking at it from the lens of Joe, or of Jane, or Julie, or whoever? What might they have seen that might be different?
mhm.
Right, and really getting you to put on different hats. And then if you still can't get there, I will um, I will be more direct at that point. But I think it's really helpful when giving feedback to try to solicit alternative perspectives, putting on almost a coaching hat as
Mhm.
a mentor, to help deliver that feedback. And then at the end, say like, okay, I really appreciate you engaging in these kind of conversations, and I want to invite you to give the same to me and make sure that this is working in our mentoring relationship. So let's have a SSCS conversation next time, and put on, take a little bit of time and think about, what am I doing that in this relationship that I should stop, start, continue, or shift doing to be better service for you. And when you invite that, you create more receptivity on the back end as well.
Mhm. I think that's absolutely fantastic. And it's something that everybody at all stages of their career can benefit from. So if you're listening to this and you're in high school and college or an internship or first, day or week on, well, probably you're probably about the first month on the job if you're just starting, try this on for size. If you're 30 years in and one day, 1 week, 1 month away from having endless Saturdays or transitioning into your next season of life, try this on for size. And these concepts, how can we utilize them outside of the workplace as well? Because last time I checked, Lisa, getting feedback, at a volunteer event or a sporting event or something with the church or something, another place isn't the end of the world, so that
Yes.
we can continue to improve everywhere.
We did a thought leader conversation with Tamara Chandler and Laura Grealish, who wrote a great book on feedback, one of the best that I've seen. It's called Feedback and Other Dirty Words. That's got some really, really, really great tips. So I love the role play. How would you have handled that differently, Pete?
I think to ask the question, hey, just wanted to ask if you're up for a little bit of feedback. As we've built again, we've set our goals, we've built rapport, we have the trust, have the respect, we know kind of our feedback styles, because this isn't conversation one. So I think to set the stage a little bit, because some people I've screwed this up before, where I've given the feedback without asking, and they're like, Pete, I was not in a great headspace today. I did not need to hear this today. Like, next time, can you just ask? And so I struggled with that one a little bit and said,
Yeah,
well, hey, if it's not going to land and you're not going to be able to take action on this, then we just wasted our time, and I probably pissed you off and, pulled ourselves apart potentially. And so
yeah,
just to ask for a little bit, love the piece of whenever we tie it to a specific instance and we can be as specific as possible. I think to also add in the caveat of doing it as timely as possible. And then the other piece of the kind of learning aspect, what might we do differently next time? And to give the homework assignment of, if this pops up again, share it, right? So that we're able to see that improvement and that growth. Next time I give a presentation, maybe I pointed at Jill instead of Bob. Okay, well, Pete, come on, let's try and take bigger steps than that.
yeah.
But the piece of how do we take action and do with what we learned?
Such a great point. And the other piece, that we didn't have the benefit of in our role play, but I think is really important, is especially if this is happening in the context of your board of advisors conversations, is when at the onset, when you are role setting, was not role playing, but when you're setting the role up front, is to say, as the learner, like, Pete, I'm so excited for you to be my champion or my advocate or my mentor or what have you. And one of the things that I ask of you there is that we have ongoing feedback. Like,
Mhm.
I want you to always feel free to share with me your feedback, so that we set that as an expectation. And then I can say, remember, since you asked me for feedback at the beginning, I'd love to offer some. Is now a good time? And that loops it back together. So that I can't emphasize enough the importance of setting agreements up front.
Mhm.
Um,
Upfront
set-
contract. You do it in the sales process, each conversation, right? Why not do it in these professional relationships? You kind of have anytime we go to a conference or like an offsite or an all day meeting or something like that, what do some of the facilitators do? All right, get your big sticky note out. We're going to write our ground rules. No cell phones, no, phone, right? Those other
yeah,
things. What are our ground rules for these relationships?
yeah. I don't know if you find this, but I can't even count on all the fingers and toes in this virtual room the number of people who will push back on me on that level of formality. It just feels too structured. And what I always say to them is, it's like a prenup, right? You setting the rules while you're still in love. And it just helps everything go much more smoothly. And also, prevents that kind of fizzle and derailing later on. I don't know if you find that as well.
Well, I liken this back to, as you increase in age and you're in that dating journey, you realize a little bit more of what you like and what you don't like. And you're
Mm,
able to get to a no, whether it's dating, whether it's sales, whether it's even just pushing for an idea or a concept. No, the time is our most precious asset that we have. We're not able to create anymore unless you're Hermione Granger with her time turner. So I gotta give, but I don't have one of those yet. Um, but it's something that we don't have a lot of. So I don't want to waste your time. And I do this out of respect. So, hey, maybe we can negotiate on a couple of these different pieces as we're setting the foundation and setting some of those goals. But if I go through my 14-point checklist and I'm like, Lisa, you just don't have enough time for me. I don't think our values are aligned. I don't think you're going to be able to give me the feedback that I need because you're too kind of a person, and I need some black and white tough love for me. And so to figure those things out in that conversation one, conversation two, wouldn't that make a lot more sense to say, hey, I'll keep you, in my realm, but not in my inner circle. And
Mm,
I appreciate this because how terrible would it be if, we tried to keep doing this or tried to keep dating or, dragging this along for 12 months and we get into those conversations that feel like those crappy manager one-on-ones and we dread walking into each of these interactions and we leave them feeling a little guilty that we should have spent our time elsewhere. Nobody wants that. So we
yeah.
just figure out, hey, what's in, what's out, and it can be a little tricky. I will say that. But what's the book that I'm reading right now is The Art of the Gathering, and it's figuring out, hey, if everybody's on my personal board, then nobody's on my personal board. If we're able to link it back to that, so
Yeah.
being defensive and selective for more success.
Yeah. Yeah. Another great book. Let's talk about AI because um, so much is changing and there's a lot of talk about AI in lots of different contexts, and mentoring, of course, is no exception. How do you see the concept of personal boards of advisors evolving as AI and other networking tools are becoming more integrated in what we do day to day?
Yeah. Those who do not know how to use AI will not necessarily lose their jobs to AI, but they'll lose their jobs to people that know how to use AI. I think that's an important piece to say. It's here to make our lives easier. I like an AI to like a dishwasher, right? It's going to save us some time, but we still have to wipe off the dishes before we put them in the dishwasher, and then we have to put them away afterwards, right? So that's kind of Pete's position. I'm a big fan. There's probably like between 9 and 17 AI tools that we'll use at Latitude on any given day or week. So big proponents, but it wanders. And so to allow AI to help us do more with less and to help us as a feedback entity, we've built AI into our software. We leverage AI in many different aspects of the work, as I mentioned. And I think it's something that we can't AI the person out of the conversation. And I think too
Mm,
many people will just ask ChatGPT, or if you're, Claude Perplexity, or what's the one that Elon Musk made, XAI. But if you just ask any of those and you take the response for gospel and run with it, you don't necessarily know what it's all rooted behind. Now, if you do say, hey, give me this advice and then cite the different research pieces, and then you go and read each of those research pieces and you can vet each of those, items, okay, then it has a little bit more oomph to it. But does it know how you're doing that day? Does it know what's always on your career map and how all these different pieces, come together and have that relationship with you? It might get there, right? And there is some sentiment that's, coming to that piece. And there's more around, hey, what are some questions that I can ask? There's a lot of things that it can do to make our lives easier. But I fear that people will look at it as a magic wand and said, I only need this and I can innovate the people out of the process, which I do not think that anybody wants that long term.
yeah.
I don't think that
Yeah.
would be good for us long term either.
Yeah. It can be a great thought partner for preparation. I mean, one of the ways that I know some mentees have used AI is, I want to talk to Pete about X, Y, and Z. Help me come up with 5 questions that I
Mhm.
can ask myself to prepare, or 5 questions that I can ask him to help help me. That's really, really useful.
Love
But
that application.
yeah, yeah, you can't there's the psychological safety and the trust and the generative, empathy piece that, I think it's hard to have with AI. I was just talking to somebody who was telling me that Mattel and OpenAI have a partnership, and that Mattel, which owns Barbie, is going to now have AI like as kids' best friends, right? And that I think it's really, really important that we remember that it's a tool, and it's an it and not a him or her or a she or a they, right there. And remembering that we need to have that humanity is really, really important.
And
Okay.
I'd also ask to, hey,
Yeah.
Bruce Lee AI as well. Man, we're tying a lot of things together, but
Yeah.
try it out. And, hopefully, I don't know if anybody wants to put into the chat, what's your weapon of choice whenever it comes to the AI suite of tools and capabilities out there. And to give it a shot and try it on for size, I think you'd be remiss if you totally let this fad or this growth piece, this new era pass you by. So there's a lot of things that are out there for free, and see what works for you, right? Add what is uniquely your own.
Pete, what a generative, exciting conversation. Thank you so much. I know I've learned a lot, and I can't wait to watch the replay as well. If you want to get in touch with Pete, his contact info is here on the screen. I hope that you will all join us for the next episode of Thought Leader Conversations on overcoming imposter syndrome and mentoring with Chris Kelso. If you don't know Chris, you should. He's written a wonderful book about overcoming the imposter, and has a lot to add as well. Any final words, final thoughts, Pete, for the folks who have joined us?
I think the biggest thing is, one, thank you for joining us and listening in. Thank you, Lisa. Please, her and Michelle put a lot of time into this, and the team do a great job. So if you're able to just share this show with one other person, tag one or two people that could benefit from listening to this, so that we can continue building up their presence in the community here. They work so hard to put goodness into the world. And if each one of us does a little bit more to help spread the word and open the aperture to really just help change people's lives, I think that's a big thing that we can all do to help one another. So thank you all. Thanks, Lisa. And excited to hear each of your stories as you continue to think about career map, personal board of advisors, and a mosaic of mentors.
Thank you so much, Pete. Thank you, everybody, for joining.